So as mindfulness develops, you start to notice stuff. You become more aware because you start to develop your ability to pay attention and receive what's there. You start to notice, gosh, I'm spending most of my life filtering through my thoughts and beliefs about what's going to happen instead of actually seeing what's going to happen. And almost everybody that goes down this path is like struck by that. Oh my gosh, I was living in fantasy and I'm starting to touch living in reality. And part of that is you start to touch the sweetness and goodness of life. You start to smell and touch and taste things that are beautiful. And we'll talk about that in the next part because that's really important. But for now, we're talking about kind of inhibiting the negative patterns because that's the other aspect of what we do. It's kind of like I said, stopping these unproductive reactive habits about your mind and your thinking, your nutritional habits, your posture, your bodily habits, what you do in the world. And it's not like you're being forced by some sort of blaming conscience and shooting yourself like, what's wrong with you? Don't you know you shouldn't do that? That's not the game. Because what happens is you just start to pay attention and you just forgive everything and you just choose to be grateful and you let go and you practice letting go and being present. And what arises naturally is just a clear choice like, I don't want to eat that stuff. Or, gosh, this person in my life is toxic. I want to do something different because there's so much negativity there. Or, gosh, look at all my own toxic thoughts. How can I be with that and let go of them? So mindfulness practice develops this observer that starts to notice the negativity, and you naturally start to just say, no, thank you. And you naturally become more forgiving with yourself and forgiving with other people. You naturally start to accept your life as it is, and that doesn't mean it's never going to change, but you're less reactive to the things that are difficult that used to grab you and pull you into severe suffering. And it's remarkable the changes that just happen naturally that I've been privileged to witness with other people. It's kind of like there's concrete and then suddenly the grass grows through the crack somehow. Like there's life in there that wants to come out. One example is a fellow that I worked with. Name is Bill, and he was a recovered alcoholic, but really struggling with cravings. He had a lot of difficult emotional stuff in his life, and every day was like a war to not drink. And we were practicing one day, and Bill basically says, I really have the urge to drink. And I said, well, okay, so what else are you experiencing? He said, well, I feel tight in my chest, and I feel irritable, my back hurts. Okay, and what about the emotions? I feel irritated. I feel angry with you for asking me all these stupid questions. So I said, okay, so how about just sit with what you're experiencing? Sit with the difficult emotions and just observe them and be with them. Notice what they feel like. Don't try to change them. Just agree, because that's what's happening. So he sits there for like a minute and a half, and then like a smile comes on his face. I'm like, why are you smiling? He's like, well, those emotions were really hard. And then they just kind of went away. And I don't feel like I need to drink anymore. So wow, that was a discovery. It was something that just came to him through observing his own life. And I could give you so many examples of things like that in my own life and the life of so many patients, where it just comes from paying attention with compassion, dropping the judgment, forgiving, being present, and cultivating this part of you that actually kind of hovers above your emotional self and your bodily self and is with you all the time. And it's an expression of a deep inner intelligence, and it's your healing intelligence. And that's the power of doing that kind of training, to unwind these pathways of mind, emotion, and physiologic reactivity that perpetuate and develop this process of chronic pain and chronic illness. And so as you practice and train yourself to be aware with compassion and with discernment, things start to change spontaneously. You start to just, you may have lived your whole life in patterns of reactivity that are mental, emotional, and physical, and you start to notice them, and they start to kind of get lighter and get less heavy, and you start to have more freedom of choice. And it's from practice, it's relearning, it's rewiring. Nerves that fire together, wire together. When I have that experience of tasting the irritation that once created reactivity, and I choose to just be with it and let it be there and say, yes, it's happening, I agree, this is what's up, letting go the judgment, then I'm turning off the reactivity. It's like I'm uncoupling it, it's those two nerves. There's the irritated and then there's the reactive nerve, right? I'm irritated, so then I get emotional. And I'm basically saying, no, I'm not believing you anymore. You're just a habit. I don't need to get reactive when that happens. And then you start to actually uncouple your physical, emotional, mental experience from your ability to choose to have the kind of experience you want to have. And that changes your physiology. It changes your neural networks. It changes your gene expression because you're living in a more calm, clear, connected state where you're not as reactive. So we talked about how there can be setbacks and how a person can be learning to live in a calmer, clearer state of mind and body, but then something happens that like knocks them on the ground, or knocks them back into the hole, or they fall in the water, so to speak, metaphorically. So what is that about, and how do you do with that? How do you deal with that? We talked a bit how just being mindful, gradually that happens less, and you develop the capacity to respond more effectively when it does happen. But the other thing is that there is deeper kinds of work than just sitting there and being mindful of what's going on. There's deeper work that involves getting therapeutic support, whether it's with an individual or a group or in your own inner work, and intentionally going in and meeting the dark places inside. Because a lot of us, most human beings, we've had experiences of profound disappointment, of hurt, of trauma, of fear, times when we felt like we were disconnected and it just wasn't okay. And there's language for this in various psychotherapeutic and spiritual traditions, but the point is meeting those places and evoking various tools for actually doing a deeper level of work to reclaim that part of yourself and to free up the deeply held protective responses that you might have in your heart or your body. That's profound work as well. It's a little bit beyond the context, or it's a little bit beyond the scope of this video, so I'm not going to go there now. But that's something else to think about and talk about, because a lot of people with chronic pain and illness have trauma. We know that early life trauma is a huge part of what influences people to develop chronic pain and chronic illness. And healing that trauma can be a profound influence on all of these physiologic processes, because what it does is sort of uncouples or discharges or disengages these deeply held patterns that said, danger! And it's about healing those so that your whole system can be more at ease and at rest. And there's techniques for learning that. Okay, so let's make a break now, and we've talked really about the process of sort of saying no and uncoupling and unlearning negative protective responses. And we also want the process of installing and learning and actually awakening healing responses. So we'll talk about that in the next vid. Hope you tune in.